Greetings, fellow peasants. I say that from a place of love and camaraderie. Thank you for tuning into the Isak Clemens Show. I am your host, Isak Clemens. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, 2026. This is episode number 23. If you'd like to contact me, you may do so by emailing me at the isacclemensshow@gmail.com. It's the same spelling as the podcast itself. I welcome all comments as long as they are positive and complimentary in nature. Please give the show a follow on the Rumble app and click on the notification button. Also on the Rumble app so you don't miss a show. I am going to be adding YouTube and Spotify, I believe, to the mix to try and get some more traction. My technical advisor told me that if I didn't, there would be dire consequences to not spreading the message out there. So keep an eye out for that. Today I'm going to be yammering on about the May 11th Board of County Commissioner regular meeting and discussing the election results from the May 19th primary, which was yesterday. So headed down the rabbit hole here with the county commissioner meeting. Usual drill is on a Monday morning, which, by the way, the next county commissioner meeting is on it's on a Tuesday because of Memorial Day. I believe that's the 26th. Next week. So pay attention to that if you're going to plan on attending or listening, etc. So the meeting started with open mic. Robert Boyles spoke, and he asked that the county commissioners consider addressing the lack of pay and compensation for the job that they do. I know, I'm not an advocate of raising taxes, generally speaking, but we do have a recruitment problem in this county when it comes to people running for elected office, and it's not just the county commission positions. It's any volunteer organization, any nonprofit, any elected office. Even a lot of the private sector jobs are struggling to find qualified people. To effectively do the job of a county commissioner, you have to be more than just a warm body. You have to be into it. And, we have there's quite a few smart people in this community, people with, the knowledge base. It would be great to have an elected office, but for $40,000 a year or even $50,000 if you're in the, the head position for the commissioner that currently Commissioner Wolf holds, it's not a lot of money, especially if you're trying to carve out a living here. The job of county commissioner is 40 hours plus a week. It's, as long as your cell phone is on, people can get a hold of you. You're responding to emails constantly, phone calls. You have the regular county commissioner meetings, which is really the tip of the iceberg. That's what the public sees. But there's a lot that goes into it. When you have a meeting agenda that has 500 to 1,000 pages. Now, some of the stuff is repeat. It's carried over from meeting to meeting. Let's just be conservative and say 500 pages of documents to go through. That's a lot of stuff. If you're going to have someone that's in a position, these, the guys that are now, they don't have staff advisors per se. They have the county administrator and the clerk, but they don't have like a dedicated entourage that travels around with them and takes care of their communications, or a true one-on-one secretary position, or someone that's going through with a fine-tooth comb. If they do, it's someone doing it on a sort of voluntary basis, perhaps. But, when you look at jobs like Congress or the state-level positions, they have interns, they have paid staffers. There's kind of a whole support staff that comes along with them. These guys, they're out on their own trying to sift through 500 pages of stuff. And, two of them are self-employed. They have their own, businesses, so that complicates things. So right now, Commissioner James and I talked about this on the podcast the other day. If who do you get, right? You get retirees of varying degrees. And, being retired here, the life is full of distractions if you're an outdoors person or you have some kind of hobby or other interest. It comes down like, how focused are you on the job? I want people that are county commissioners, or any elected official for that matter, that are focused on the work at hand. This isn't like 1 hour a week kind of gig here. So, or you get people that are, I don't know. I don't know what the other demographic is. It seems to be in more recent times people that are somehow independently wealthy and could afford to give up the time to do this, because you're certainly not doing it for the money. Or people that are retirees. If you want to attract, I think the ideal candidate would be sort of that middle of the road cross section, that you'd find on the chart or the bell curve or whatever, the Venn diagram, is cackling Kamala used to, love referring to her Venn diagrams. But anyway, how do you get that person, right? That's someone that is probably has a family, or they're working, they might be working over the hill or whatever. I mean, how do you jump out of a career for 2 or 4 years, and then the career isn't necessarily waiting for you to go back, especially if you're self-employed. It's a lot of things to juggle. So I do think that it's time to examine the compensation structure for the county commissioners, on the payroll side, not necessarily on the benefits side. They get if you're around long enough in elected office in Idaho, you get into the state pension program. They get health benefits, which there's that's a nice thing to have if you're otherwise don't have access to that stuff. But I know there'll be some screeching and howling about the idea of raising their pay. But you look at what the clerk positions are paid, or the other elected officials. They're there serving a kind of a more traditional 9 to 5. They're in the office 98% of their workday, with the exception of meetings or travel or whatever related to their job. But the commissioner job, they're all over the place. These guys are like the mayor of the county, and it's a lot to ask of someone for $40,000 a year, because by the time you take taxes out of there, you can cut out 20% or more in taxes and other withholdings. So, I understand doing your civic duty and all that stuff, but unfortunately, you can't go to Bank of America to pay your mortgage and say, "I'd like to redeem 3, civil service credits, or civil duty, or civic duty rather, tokens, and have you reimburse me for my mortgage or pay for my groceries." So we'll see what happens with that. Commissioner James said when the opportunity was there last time, they decided to forego the raise, so that the employees working in the courthouse could, receive that allotment of money or whatever and spread it around rather than taking it for themselves, which I appreciate. But I don't know what to do. If you're paying attention at all about recruiting candidates to run for office here, it's like pulling teeth out of an angry rabid alligator. I don't know if alligators get rabies or whatever, but it's a growing problem in our community. So, Galen Hellier spoke. I think I had proposed setting up a betting line on her next appearance, and if it was going to be about roads, or what the over under was on appearances for the year. This time it wasn't necessarily about roads, but she is again asking the Board of County Commissioners to do something to stop construction. She's proposing a 6 to 12 month stop on bigger projects. I don't know what qualifies as a bigger project. Is that a big house on a lot of acreage? Is that 10 homes on 10 acres? I don't know what the definition for bigger projects is, but let's sort of break this down. I mean, to me, this is a very disgusting and selfish request to go up in front of the elected officials. And, this is a persuadable group of people. They kind of walk the line on being pro or anti-development, depending on things. That's my observation. So, you get up there and put this idea in their head. It's not it's not out of the realm of possibility. They might just consider it. According to the public records, Galen is someone who bought property. She built a house up on the hill, and now she wants to stop anyone else who seeks to do the same. Maybe it's just the evil subdivisions. Not everyone has the interest or time, because where do you stop construction? You say, "Oh, we can't build a subdivision." Well, in Teton County, a subdivision is anything more than 2 lots. I think the state defines it as anything more than 5 lots. But either way, not everyone has the interest or the time or the resources to go out and acquire a piece of property, or buy a piece of property with an existing building on it and tear it down and rebuild it and go through all the process of hiring a contractor, engineers, architects, all the paperwork, etc. So, some people, the idea of a built-out neighborhood is what they want. They want a place that maybe there's other families and children running around for their kids to play with, or they want a different sense of community. Not everybody wants to be on 80 acres isolated. It might be my idea of heaven, but that's not everyone's idea. There's some economy of scale stuff that happens when a developer, the word developer here has become this, word that's synonymous with the second coming of Satan, which, there are times where developers certainly deserve and earn that title, but that's not that's not the standard. I don't think it's the standard here in Teton County. But I think it's just wrong to get up there in front of your elected officials and all but demand that they stop building construction. I mean, you look at the downstream and the upstream effects of cutting off construction. There's a lot of jobs here in Teton County that revolve around construction. If you stopped construction here, you would potentially bankrupt families overnight by doing that. If you told people, oh, yeah, we're going to shut down your means of work for the next year, that's devastating to families, working class people that are in the construction trades, maybe on the supply side. They might be out there swinging a hammer. Then you get into the professional services, the engineering, the architecture stuff. There's a lot of jobs in Teton County that are impacted by construction. You have the whole construction rental equipment. I mean, it even our economic footprint goes far beyond Teton County. It goes as far as Rexburg, Idaho Falls, Blackfoot, into Wyoming, where we're buying and sourcing things from. I mean, there's a lumber mill up in St. Anthony. A lot of their work comes from Teton County. If you stop construction in Teton County for a year, that would impact a small family business up the road. And for what? The demand is still going to be there. If you stop construction right now, I mean, her argument is to let the county catch up. I don't know what that means, to catch up, because let's say you do catch up. As soon as you open the door again, there's going to be that pent up demand there waiting to come in and just sort of steamroll through things. You're going to have the same amount of applications for building permits flooding in. I mean, it's really, I think, a selfish, disgusting behavior to get up there and say, I got mine. I'm kicking the ladder out. I'm planting the flag. I don't want anyone building near me, by me, above me, below me, whatever. And, it's all under this squishy ruse of, well, the infrastructure in the county. What do you mean the infrastructure in the county? The infrastructure will catch up eventually. It might not be as fast and up to everyone's liking, but eventually, someday, if you come back here in 30 years, there will be more paved roads. The sewer saga in Victor and Driggs surely will have been resolved. Fall River will have their substation problem resolved one way or another. I mean, these things take time. They take resources, money, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that this behavior goes straight into the trash can. And people, I hope they're listening and they go, oh, wow, it really is a bad look to go and stand up there during a public comment period and demand that my elected officials shut down construction after I got mine. I mean, ugh. Mary Mason, also from Tetonia, she thinks that things are moving too quickly. She's also asking for a building construction moratorium. She has concerns. I don't know how this ties into building construction in Teton Valley, but she has concerns about the drought declaration and the Snake River aquifer, and you guessed it, climate change. So now we're going to shut building construction down because of this, the big boogeyman, climate change. I thought the climate change ship had kind of sailed, and that was sort of losing momentum, but apparently not. It's alive and well in Teton County. Howie Garber got up and spoke an open mic. He's been a regular guest in more recent times with the Sweetwater True Love fly in, fly out airplane subdivision down by the airport. He is very much against it. He had some questions about Sweetwater. Just to reiterate, open mic is not a Q&A period. Open mic is, by the grace of the commissioners, they allow members of the public to come in and speak, and it's supposed to be for items that are on the agenda that don't have a public hearing attached to them, so you can sound off about it. The commissioners now are pretty generous with what people can talk about. If you have a new concern or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of things that get brought up on mic. They could have been an email, they could have been a phone call, but if you want to go, I think it's good sometimes to go and speak in person, and your face-to-face voice is certainly better. Sometimes I think there's a better chance your face-to-face voice communication has a better chance of being received and understood and being more impactful than an email that's fired off at 2:00 in the morning. You don't know if it's going to get read or how thoroughly it's going to be digested by the people reading it. If you get 100 emails, you're skimming through. Okay, next. So fine, but again, open mic, we don't want the commissioners to get sour on this and take this opportunity away. Or, there's other municipalities, you have to sign up ahead of time to go and speak. You have to tell them what you're going to speak about, so on and so forth. So open mic is not a Q&A period to get, it's one-way communication. It's you speaking and the commissioners allegedly listening to you. It's more of a listening session. Maybe they should rename it listening session instead of open mic. But no questions. And you can ask whatever you want, but there's no they don't have any obligation to respond to you. In fact, it puts the commissioners potentially in more legal jeopardy if they start responding and giving questions and get into this back and forth thing. It's not the time for it. Uh, there was someone from the peanut gallery shouted out, "Really?" when Commissioner Wolf said that the public comment period for the Sweetwater project had been closed. I mean, again, this is our elected office here. This is the people's building, the courthouse, the meeting room. Like, I've talked about this before. Like, there's no respect or decorum from some of these people, and it's just like you could never go into a courtroom, and this is a quasi judicial setting, right? This is a public meeting, and just start shouting at people. I mean, there's other jurisdictions, someone starts yelling from the back of the room, that whoever is presiding over the meeting, they pick up the gavel and start banging away and say, "Hey, this is your first and last warning. You start yelling again, you're out of here." But I don't know. People come here, and I guess if they're allowed to get away with it, they just keep doing it. But bad look. Howie then rambled on, asking questions, even though he was told this is not the time to ask for questions. Again, just to reiterate, the time to offer comments is during the public hearing, not 4 weeks later. It's like a scab. They keep picking at this wound, and the time has sailed. It's if you want to offer public comment and have it be meaningful and impactful, you have to go and speak during a public hearing. These things are all properly noticed. They're in the newspaper. They send letters to the affected property owners within a certain distance of the property boundaries of whatever the parcel is that's in question. They'll post physical postings out at the property. So if you're driving down the road and you see a wood stake show up with a little piece of paper in it with fine print, pull your car over and get out and look what it is, especially if it's in your neighborhood. It may be of concern to you, but you can't show up 4 weeks later. You're holding up someone's project, and they have rights to their property, and you don't just get to keep bringing things up just to try and stall and stop and delay. Like, the ship has sailed. Item number 6 was a public appearance by Leanne Everett. She's the CEO/CFO of Teton Valley Healthcare. She provided an update on the hospital. My takeaway is if the hospital was a patient, they're not in the ICU. They're, in my opinion, they're in like an intensive physical therapy rehab program recovering from a major surgery. So, maybe like double hip, double knee, and 2 shoulder replacements. And they're trying to get their feet under them financially and get things squared away. Major issues that exist in our rural hospital, they exist in just about every rural hospital. She pointed out the struggles with billing, the revenue stream, employee recruitment and retention. I mean, people that work in the medical world, they tend to draw a nice salary, but if you haven't noticed, it's expensive to live here in Teton Valley. And let's say you live in Rexburg. You just go work at a hospital in Rexburg. There's probably more opportunity there, maybe better compensation package. You have to be an intrepid person to, schlep here every day to work at our hospital if you're commuting from somewhere. So it is a challenge that our hospital faces. A lot of businesses in the Valley face the same problem. How do you recruit people and retain them? They're going to be having some meetings. This meeting may have happened already. Commissioner Powers was going to be meeting with the people from the hospital to talk about restoring some of the infusion services. That was a service that was dismantled when the hospital kind of was on shaky financial ground a few months. So they're looking at bringing that back. The idea of a taxing district for the hospital has been tabled, according to Ms. Everett. She did mention that if things don't pan out financially, it could be revisited in 2027. So you got to pay attention to this. Off-election years are a wonderful time to get special taxes across the finish line. You just saw that. We'll talk about this in a little bit with the special road and bridge levy. I mean, here it is. It's May. 22% pathetic voter turnout in Teton County. And we just signed up for another $1.5 million to be siphoned out of our checking accounts for roads and bridges. So, just keep an eye on that. If this thing pops up, this county has a pretty good track record of if you put it on the ballot, it will pass. And it seems to be semi-unique to Teton County. Looking around other places in East Idaho with the election that was yesterday, let's say there was 10 ballot measures, whether it was schools or Rexburg wanted a new police station. Maybe half of them passed, and the other half did not. There's different thresholds depending on what you're asking for. Some need a supermajority, some it's 50% plus one, as the case with our road and bridge levy. But just keep an eye on the hospital taxing district one. I wouldn't be surprised. This is sort of the art of the deal, right? No, we don't need it now, but maybe next year. Next year's not that far away, so we'll see. Overall, should give a very detailed overview of what's going on with the hospital. Considering the amount of time that she was there speaking, it was a pretty in-depth tell. She's very well spoken, and if you want to know what's going on with the hospital in more detail than I'm giving you here, go back to the May 11th County Commissioner video on the county webpage. Starting at 15 minutes and 40 seconds into the meeting, you can listen to her whole spiel. Commissioner James said he had a 5-star experience with a total shoulder replacement at the hospital. So I guess we'll have to watch his golf game and see. We can decide if the hospital's running smoothly. She stressed that, they're trying to beef up on their messaging, trying to demystify some of the things that are going on at Teton Valley Hospital. I think that's a criticism they have perhaps received. The public doesn't it's not fun to talk about, right? If you're running an organization that's not on good financial ground, nobody wants to talk about that, especially in the public sphere. But they're trying to, right the wrongs with their communication efforts on that, and I guess be a little bit more transparent to the public. She does plan on returning to the county commissioner meetings on a monthly basis, as long as they ask her. So if you're interested in the hospital, it's a good place to get information straight from the source. Item number 7 on the agenda was the Public Works report. They're going to be replacing a bridge through a federal grant on Ramble Mountain Road over Badger Creek. It's a $2.7 million grant, no local money needed. It's slated for 2029. They think that's going to be moved up. That's how it's gone historically with this type of funding. So keep an eye on that. It's a little further down the road because they consider this an off-system bridge. If this was a bridge on Highway 33 and was deficient, they would probably be able to hop to it a little bit quicker. But we'll take the federal money even if we have to wait a little bit. Which, by the way, have you noticed how many bridges there are in Teton County that don't have guardrails on them over the water? So be careful out there. You could be upside down for a long time before help gets to you. So another thing that Daryl, the head of the Public Works Department, brought up is the topic of the magnesium chloride treatment they use on the roads. And instead of spraying new product every year, which is a cost to it, they're looking into the idea of sort of rejuvenating the existing magnesium chloride that's sort of soaked into the road base. And I guess the idea is they go out there and sort of churn it up with a motor grader and maybe get it wet again and sort of, bring it back to the surface so they don't have to keep applying product. I did, you hear them throw around the term, going to have the roads magged or the mag chloride or whatever. I pulled up a little document here online about, about magnesium chloride, if you're curious. And so it says, what is magnesium chloride? Magnesium chloride is a salt compound. You might hear people call it mag chloride or its chemical name. Mag chloride is available in solid forms, including pellets and flakes. The treatment works virtually on any soil type. It's used on roads to control dust, stabilize soil, and de-ice surfaces, especially on unpaved roads. I thought this was interesting. It said unpaved roads are very common, accounting for 32% of U.S. public roads in 2020. So maybe we're more of a developing country than we had thought. That's because unpaved roads are more cost-effective than paved roads. They're cheaper to construct and maintain and suited for low traffic. I guess the problem here is a lot of our unpaved roads don't exactly have low traffic on them. So then, let's see. Magnesium, this isn't getting to the chemistry here, but magnesium chloride is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture from the air. That keeps the road stamp much longer than alone, lowering the amount of dust that comes off the road. It also creates a moisture barrier that bonds to soil particles, preventing them from coming off the ground. I think you can see this in action. If you've ever had like a bucket of rock salt in your garage, say over the winter, and you go back and it's full of water, I think you're seeing that sort of up close and personal. And when you see after they treat the roads do look damp for quite a while, and eventually through rain and cars going up and down the road, I think it loses its mojo. But this article goes on. There's some criticism about environmental damage, corrosion, so on and so forth. So it's not it's a cost-effective way to sort of keep the dust down and hold the road together. It's not as good as paved roads, but such is life. So that's my book report about magnesium chloride. They had a cleanup day this past weekend. It appeared to be pretty well attended. I went and dropped some things off myself. They, great job to the people who work at the transfer station. They run a pretty well-oiled machine there. And after the first 20 minutes or so, there was pretty much no traffic delays. I think everyone had the same idea: get here at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 and be in line. And there was probably about 50 people in line. So I hope they keep doing that. It's more or less free. There's some caveats to that depending on exactly what you're bringing, but it's certainly better than what you'd pay other times of the year. Now, there was people there with trucks full of tires and construction debris, etc. There was also this had been asked for a couple meetings ago, a cost benefit analysis on the county's low speed grinder. So that if you haven't seen it, it's sitting, it moves around. It's on tracks, I believe, out there at the transfer station. They bought this big grinder, this industrial machine. It's like the size of a school bus, and I think you could probably put a school bus in it, and it'll grind it up and spit it out. And there is a report in the agenda packet for the May 11th commissioner meeting, but Danny O'Donnell, who's the solid waste supervisor, he prepared this report, and he basically laid out a couple of the reasons why it was good for the county to make the investment in this piece of equipment. One of them was we don't have to pay a third party to come in on an annual basis and grind up the lumber pile. We can handle that ourselves. So that avoids the logistics, getting approval at the commissioner level, dealing with a contractor. Now we can just have our own employees do it as needed and avoid moving material around. They probably spent as much time just moving material around. Now they can just put it right in the grinder, and they reclaim some of that stuff out there and use it for sort of mulch on the driving paths and to line some of the other areas where the trash is dumped. But the big thing with this grinder is you can almost put 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, right? We have these big tractor trailer setups that go from the transfer station out to the landfill, and if you can only get, they're figuring they can get an extra ton or two of material in each truckload now because they're able to consolidate the material by running it through this grinder. So if you've ever filled a dumpster like a roll-off container with construction debris, it becomes very tricky to load things in there so that you're maximizing the volume of the container. And I mean, when they're loading stuff at the transfer station, they're probably using like an excavator or something with a grabber or a claw on it. This isn't like doing brain surgery. So it's hard to get things sort of nested in there. And then they have to use a machine and smash it into the truck to try and consolidate it. And that beats up on the equipment. Now with this grinder, I think they can work a little bit more civilly. So there is a report there. But basically they're looking at a 10% reduction in the number of loads necessary to transport the same weight of material to the landfill. So that's cool. Good on them for getting that. I believe they leased it for a period of time, and my understanding is now they actually bought the piece of equipment. The RAD contract discussion is still ongoing. The big sticking point that they are trying to hammer out is the exclusivity contract. My read on this, both the county's proposal and RAD's proposal are redlined. They're in the agenda packet. The county proposal, again, this is my interpretation of it, says that another vendor could come in and provide niche hauling services and related, debris removal services, as long as they check all the boxes, meaning they're licensed, they're registered with the county, they're insured, they're doing it safely, EPA, whatever. The RAD proposal says more or less the same thing, but RAD wants to be the one that vets. They want a 90-day window. If someone comes into the county and says, hey, I want to clean up scrap metal on people's property, RAD wants to have first right of refusal, but along with that, they want a 90-day window to be able to look at the contract proposal and see if RAD might turn around and say, well, nah, you know what, we're going to offer that service and send the other proposed vendor packing. Apparently, this issue came up in the last year. Someone came to the county. They wanted to provide a similar service, and there were some questions about whether it would be a violation of RAD essentially has this contract or this monopoly, which is allowed by state law for them to be the sole source vendor for trash hauling. And the county commissioners, they're all on board with RAD being the sort of sole source provider for household trash removal. So the truck comes down and you pick up the garbage can kind of stuff. They're fine with RAD having the contract on that. That makes sense. You don't want 5 houses on one street and every Monday there's 5 different garbage companies coming to pick up, 5 individual trash cans. It's sort of the other services, specifically the construction debris removal that seems to be a sticking point here. So we'll see how that shakes out. They still have a good amount of runway to strike a deal with that and come to agreeable terms. There was also some people have apparently contacted the commissioners saying they would like to see this contract go out to bid rather than it just being renewed on a recurring basis. So we'll see what happens there. The turning lane into the fairgrounds is getting paved this week. So that's if you're headed north on Highway 33. This would be your sort of right hand. You got a turn lane now on the right hand shoulder if you're coming from Driggs to help avoid, when you're pulling a horse trailer into the rodeo grounds, you don't want some Yahoo behind you with Utah plates doing 90 miles an hour coming out of Driggs in a rental vehicle, crawling up your rear end with your, $100,000 of ponies in tow. So now those people will be able to pull off to the right shoulder there and have their own dedicated turn lane. If I recall, this was a joint project. The Idaho Transportation Department took care of all the road prep and cutting and subgrade work, and the county had to kick in for the asphalt portion of it. I believe that was a $40,000 commitment from the county side. Let's see. Item number 8. This was 8.1 was a major plat amendment for the Log Cabin Lane subdivision. Major plat amendment request. Nelson Engineering presented on behalf of the applicant. So this is a project down south part of the county on the west side of the highway. There's a parcel of land that's zoned at IR. I think that's industrial research. And it was 2 lots, and the zoning table allows for a minimum lot size of 1 acre. So the applicant, I think initially wanted 19 1-acre lots. They reduced it to 18. I'm guessing they had to allow space for maybe a fire pond or roads, infrastructure, easements, etc. Two people spoke against the plat amendment. One was a neighbor who gave a very passionate speech about why it shouldn't be approved. Here's the problem. This lady spoke about her lovingly maintained flower garden and her dog running around and drinking from the canal. These are not good arguments for stopping a project that meets the zoning requirements. They are important to that one person. They're about to have a major construction disruption in our lives. Their scenery is going to change. Maybe the makeup and feel of the neighborhood. Yes, those things are all going to change. That's what happens when someone builds near you or next to you. But trying to stop construction because of your flower garden in your yard and your dog running around, I feel like the punches didn't land with the commissioners because they ended up, not agreeing with that person. Mary Mason, who spoke in open mic, also spoke in opposition and expressed her support for a building moratorium again. So I don't get this. I do think that there is demand locally for shop space. That type of zoning is very limited in the county. There's, a lot of people kind of doing that stuff under the radar, under the home occupation rules, but I do think that there's a demand for that. So I don't think if this thing gets built out, and I don't know if the owners are selling the lots with that zoning and someone could come in and build the appropriate kind of building, or if they're going to do the build out themselves and lease or sell the completed buildings. But I would be shocked if these buildings sat vacant for very long. especially for those in like the construction type of business, that need a place to store equipment and materials. And, it sounds to me like the perfect kind of place for a cabinet shop or, furniture manufacturing, et cetera. So we'll see. They ended up voting on this 3-0 and tabled the decision. But then, like many commissioner meeting decisions, there was a cliffhanger, and they kind of went back, and it seemed there was more discussion and confusion about the process. So they made a new motion, and the motion was to approve the preliminary plat, and that passed 2-1. So initially it was 3-0 to table it, and then there was some back and forth, and well, now what? And they ended up reopening it and approved it ultimately. Item 8.3 was the MT, I assume that's Mount Nord, Nord subdivision project. This is just north of the city of Tetonia in the area of impact. The area of impact in the city of Tetonia, or I should say the city of Tetonia area of impact, allows for 2.5 acre minimum lot sizes. There were some public comments. It was the usual talking points from the public, concerns about the wildlife disturbances, even though it's being cultivated right now. So the way the land is, I believe it's a bit of a hillside there. So there's some sage area that's not cultivated. I'm looking at the satellite images saying this. But, I sometimes when people say, yeah, it's being cultivated now, but this is big game migration corridor, or this is sage grouse nesting area, or there's a lek there. That's where the birds lay their eggs in the ground. I look at these people. I'm like, it's being farmed right now. I mean, farming by its very nature, sort of shuts down every use on that piece of land other than the product they're growing, whether it's barley or cows. Very few things will coexist. If you have 20 acres of land and you're growing barley on there, you only want barley to grow on there. You don't want the mice eating it. You don't want the birds landing there. You don't want the sandhill cranes eating your grain. You're spraying herbicides and pesticides on it. Like, you basically have dirt, rocks, and the product you're growing. And if you're growing cows out there or sheep or goats, they trample the hell out of the land. And what do? They walk around, they eat, sleep, and shit on that piece of property. That's all they do. There's no the elk are not coexisting with the cows. In fact, the farmers don't want them in there because of potential disease, communicable disease spread. Horses and elk don't get along. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen 6 hungry horses run off 20 elk fighting over alfalfa. So this whole notion that farming is like good for the environment, I don't think that's true. Is it bad for the environment? Let's call it neutral. But you can't be upset that someone's taking their land that's being used in part for cultivating crops right now, and they're going to put homes there. I think sometimes actually when you take it out of farm or ag production and put homes there, depending on how the people live and what their lifestyle is, et cetera, I think sometimes it's actually more beneficial to the wildlife because they're going to plant landscaping, they're going to irrigate the lawns a little bit, they're going to, they're not going to churn up the soil every year and, kill everything on it other than what they're growing. So I just feel like that's another weak argument to stop development is the whole, keeping farming going on it. I think people, maybe they're coming around to this idea, but if there's a square inch of space in anywhere in the world, especially here in Teton Valley, if it's allowed to be built on, I would assume that at some point it might get built on. It's very tiring listening to, no, we have to stop this. We have to stop this. And like, I look at these people, I'm like, where do you live? Are you floating around? Are you living in the only people I would give a pass to are like the handful of nomads that exist in North America still that bounce around in a tent or a van, sort of boondocking in the national forest or BLM property or some other kind of public land thing. Like, their footprint is pretty small in the world compared to, especially if you're living in a tent and moving around by foot. But otherwise, like, everyone else has some kind of brick and mortar building and they're doing something with the land, even if they're just cutting the grass or watching the weeds grow. Like, they're occupying a piece of land and they had their opportunity to build. So, yeah, enough of that. Galen Hellier spoke again. This particular subdivision, she said, abuts her property line. She expressed concerns about this project. She leveled the accusation that the developers of the Mount Nord and Flag Ranch subdivisions, they're side by side, that they colluded to skirt a bigger traffic impact study, or a major traffic impact study, as she called it, because there are two lots and are smaller, and she's saying they don't meet the threshold for the type of traffic study she would prefer. The applicant responded at the meeting and said, it's two different landowners, two different developments that happen to be side by side. There is some cooperation between the developers with fire ponds, I believe, and some of the road access stuff. They're going to connect roads instead of building like two isolated subdivisions. There was talk about how to sort of interconnect the two. But the applicant was said, I don't know what the history was. I'm taking this for their word. How these two individual people ended up getting the pieces of land they each have and doing the build out that they're proposing. And then Joshua, the county planner, stated the new land development code does not explicitly state what type of traffic study is required. It sounds like the old land use code did. And that it turns out it's more of a conversation between the county and an applicant to have a working understanding of what's needed. And it sounds like, from what Joshua was saying, he was satisfied with, the conversation ahead leading up to the applicant putting in to build this subdivision. Doesn't sound like there was anything nefarious going on with trying to skirt traffic studies or. So again, I think in the end, Josh basically said that Galen's point was moot. These people were not trying to obstruct or dodge or sneak around doing some other kind of traffic study. I mean, to me, it's kind of a straight shot off the highway, up the dirt road there, and you would be into either I think each subdivision has 10 lots, maybe. These are not 100 lot subdivisions. So, again, I don't understand the showing up, and to me, if I understood everything that was said at this meeting, there was an accusation made that was completely baseless and almost dreamt up in the context of the complaint. There was a motion to continue this hearing to 5/26. And again, just take note that there's no meeting on Monday. It's on Tuesday because of Memorial Day. And if I may digress for a moment, if you've never attended a Memorial Day service here in Teton County, I would recommend it highly that you find the cemetery that's closest to you, or any cemetery for that matter. The local VFW post does a phenomenal job. They make their rounds that morning and stop at every cemetery and do a little speech. There's usually some kind of singing and 21 gun salute and all that stuff. And it's a good way to interact with your neighbors, and you find out who is a veteran, who has served. So it's quite a bit of history here in Little Teton Valley. We're a long way from the shores of Normandy and Europe and other battlefields, but there's quite a few people in our community who have served on behalf of the Uncle Sam. And so, check out the Memorial Day services and honor the fallen. All right. Item 8.4, this is the Sweetwater reconsideration. This had the standing issue, right? There was a group of people led by Howie Garber who didn't like the decision that was made about the commissioners approving the Sweetwater subdivision. This has been in progress for years and years and years. They got it approved, and this group came out and said, what about the leaded airplane fuel? And the commissioner said, yeah, what about it? You should have shown up during public hearing, and we could have actually weighed this in our decision-making process, or tried to, I guess. But again, you guys show up after the fact trying to make this argument, and it does, we're sorry. Like, we think we hear what you're saying, but you missed your window here. So they ended up telling them, no, you don't have standing. And if you want to hear some of the back and forth of how they arrived at that calculus, check out the recording of the commissioner meeting. One thing I will be curious to see, sort of the unintended consequences of this, people bringing up a particular argument. So the group that's proposing the Y, the Y is now what used to be known as the YMCA. So the Y, they approached the school board in the last couple of weeks and asked them about acquiring a piece of property by the menagerie of schools there, right next to the airport, to the south of the airport, and whatever, good for them. But now been this argument brought up. Well, we can't have this subdivision built with all these airplanes flying around because of the leaded fuel problem, and it's contaminating the schools and the dirt and the birds and the fish, and the kids in the schools are now eating lead dust or whatever. So I'll be curious to see if the Y is successful in getting that piece of property. Will the same people who tried stopping the Sweetwater project, will they show up to the school board meetings or the Y construction build out meetings and try and shut it down? And this stuff interests me, of like the political blood sport side of it. I think there's probably a lot of overlap between the group of people that want to shut down the airport project because of leaded plane fuel. I bet there's a lot of overlap with some of those same people are also pro recreation district, and they want a rec center, and they want something like the Y built down, a swimming pool, and all this stuff. So I'll be curious to see what happens with the lead dust lobbying group in Teton Valley here. There was some other IT stuff, commissioners' reports, etc. Nothing earth-shattering that I'm going to report on. As always, I'd urge you to tune in to, pick one government meeting that happens here on a recurring basis. And, once you watch one or two episodes, it's better drama TV than anything Netflix or Amazon or Hulu could offer you. I'm not really, I say that joking, but I'm not really joking. I mean, some of the stuff is pretty dramatic, and it's even more entertaining because it's real. These are not paid actors. Well, maybe sometimes there's paid actors, but these are people in your community. You might know some of them. These are decisions that are being talked about that directly impact everyone's day to day here. So I'd really encourage you to pick one. If everyone picked one meeting to sort of babysit or bird dog, I think the community would be obviously more informed. There would be less of this come from behind and less confusion, less rumor mill. There's something like 7,000 registered voters in this county, so it'd be nice if more than like 16 of them were paying attention with what's going on. Let's see here. All right. I I appreciate each and every person that listens to this podcast and takes the time to do so. But nothing would make me happier than if, instead of listening to me, you just took the same hour, and went and tuned into one of these local government meetings. Or you could do both. I mean, that would be fine too. So on to the election. So yesterday, May 19th, was the primary elections in the state of Idaho. In the state of Idaho, the primary elections, especially the Republican Party, that's where it's at. So what I mean by that is, if you win as a Republican and become the nominee for the party for whatever seat you're running for, just because of the voting demographic in the state of Idaho, you're all but guaranteed a victory in the general election. It's not always the case, but it's pretty damn certain, especially in East Idaho. I couldn't, it's not often that a Democrat will win the state level races in East Idaho. So you really need to vote in the primary election if you want to have impact on, want your vote to really count in the state of Idaho. So I'm not going to go into super detail on every race, but Jim Risch, Mike Simpson, and Brad Little all won. There was only one state level incumbent that I saw in East Idaho that was ousted. That was down in the Pocatello area. It was District 29, seat B as in boy. Tanya Burgoyne lost to Jennifer Miles by 40 votes, 4-0. So if you think your vote doesn't count, it absolutely does. And just as a matter of statistics, every election is winnable by either party right now because there's so many votes unaccounted for out there. There was a dismal, pathetic, just awful turnout in Teton County. It always is. 22% of registered voters turned out in Teton County. That's roughly 1 out of 5 people voted in the primary election yesterday. So if you're ever thinking about running for office, with enough door knocking and good messaging and a good platform to go along with the good messaging, I think any election is winnable in East Idaho. Everything's up for grabs. So let's see here. Just as an FYI, Idaho has no term limits for the governor's office. Brad Little is 72 years old. I'll be curious if he runs again. He would be 76 or 77 when he gets out of office, if he completes this upcoming term. And I'm, I'm talking like this is an assumed, foregone conclusion, which, there's a chance that Governor Little could lose in the general election. I think it's statistically improbable, though. Teton County had no primary challenges for local office. So that was the commissioner, the assessor, the clerk, the treasurer. They all ran unopposed in the primary. They will all most likely face an opponent in the general election. Pretty even split between Democrats and Republicans running in those offices that you'll see on the ballot come November. In 2 years, so in 2028, I believe, the prosecuting attorney and the sheriff will be on the ballot for Teton County. Again, just a disgusting, abysmal, pathetic turnout in Teton County. 22% voter turnout. So that broke down to 1,666 ballots cast out of 7,659 registered voters. So that's really unfortunate. We live in polite society where we are afforded the privilege of voting, and so many people just they don't fulfill their civic duty in doing so, which I think is tragic. I bet the cynic in me says if I went and interviewed the other 4 out of 5 people that didn't vote, I bet a lot of them they could tell you about the horrors of the world or what's going on 3,000, 4,000, 8,000 miles away, and how screwed up things are, and on and on and on and on. And then you say, well, did you vote? No, and then my second favorite question is, do you even know, who your elected officials are? I have no idea. Right. But you could tell me what's going on at the No Kings protest or on the other side of the world in Israel and Iran and, South Africa or Germany or whatever, but they have no idea what's going on in their own backyard. So definitely need to do better. And to my point, I think any election is winnable if you do enough door knocking, because there are a lot of votes out there that are not being used. If there was 7,000 registered voters here and 6,800 people were voting and you were having consistent election results, that's a pretty tough hill to climb if you're trying to, flip a seat or sway the opposition, if you will. So, yeah, not good. There was a special road and bridge levy that passed with overwhelming support, 68 to 31, more or less, on the vote total. So the bad news with this road and bridge levy, if you don't read the whole ballot measure, the ballot measure says you're going to be paying $22 per $100,000 of assessed property values. A few years ago, I was having dinner with a friend, and they said, "Oh yeah, I voted in favor of whatever it was at the time. I think it was a school levy. It was only $50." I'm like, "Yeah, $50 per $100,000 of assessed property value. I mean, your average house in Teton County right now, I think it's $800,000. So some are more, some are less, of course. But 8 times 5, well, I don't know, what is that? I went to public school. $400 a year extra you're paying, and so you got to read the whole thing, and that's pretty much always the case with these financial ballot measures. You'll see if you just glance at it. Oh, it's only $22. You have to see it says 22 per $100,000 of assessed property value. So just be careful with that and know what you're voting for. The bad news is this is just a continuation of an existing levy. So don't expect all the roads to get paved and bridges to have guardrails and no more potholes, etc. I think you're just going to see a continue, incremental improvement over time. So this $1.5 million, I mean, if you've bought a truckload of rocks in the last couple of years, you know how expensive a single dump truckload of gravel might be. $400 or $500, depending on the product you're buying. So, it doesn't take many dump truck loads of gravel, and then you factor in labor and equipment costs, so on and so forth. Like $1.5 million is like pissing into the wind here. Um, so just going back to the whole importance of primaries in Idaho, this is off the Secretary of State's webpage. It says the purpose of primary elections in the state of Idaho is to allow members of a recognized political party to select that party's nominees to go onto the general election ballot. Primary elections are referred to sometimes as party primaries. So in Idaho, you have like the Republican club and the Democrat club. There's others, the libertarians and the constitutional, and on and on and on. Uh, but these are private entities, more or less, right? And they, through primaries, they pick their candidate that they want to be representing them on the November ballot. This is not California or New York, where you have like these jungle primaries or ranked choice voting where you just lock everyone in a room and you vote for whoever you want. Like California, I think right now is regretting their whole jungle primary system because they might end up with in California if there's 10 people running for say governor like this year. I don't know. There's quite a few people on the primary ballot in California. The top two vote getters move on to the general election. Well, California probably thought, oh, yeah, it's always going to be two Democrats facing each other. Well, this year, they're looking at the very real possibility of two Republicans being on the general election ballot in November. So that whole system might backfire on them. But, my opinion, no matter what you do with election rules, uh, dishonest or disingenuous people will find a way to work around the system instead of just offering a better product, a better candidate, a better platform. Um, so you hear people say, "Well, Idaho is this bright red state, and it's hardcore Republican." It's like, I don't know. Is it? There's for better or worse, perhaps unfortunately, there's no purity test for what party you affiliate for or how you vote. Um, and when it's a handful of people playing games in elections, yeah, whatever, it gets lost in the shuffle. When you have what you have now, where tens of thousands of people that will crossover vote as they call it, or they'll affiliate with, say they have leftist progressive views, but they know that the leftist progressive candidate has no chance as it sits right now in the state of Idaho with the math. They'll register as a Republican. Now, the Republican Party has done some things to try and tighten that up and prevent people from, affiliating with the Republican Party and then unaffiliating and going back and forth. And I think now what you have is people that are committed to that lifestyle of, I'll call it meddling in the Republican primary. They have just chosen to stay registered as Republicans in perpetuity, even though they have no affiliation in real life with the Republican Party or, more importantly, the Republican platform. And, instead of, they're Democrats at heart, right, or lefty progressives or radicals, whatever you want to call them. Instead of them putting up a good candidate with a great platform that their like-minded people could get behind, they do the next best thing, and they go and they prop up someone that'll put the R after the name for Republican and run under the Republican ticket, even though they'll run as a Republican. It's like a duck, right? They'll talk like a duck, quack like a duck, walk like a duck, and then what do? They get to Boise and they sing like a sparrow instead of quacking like a duck. So, I don't know what the solution is to that unless you start hanging people up by their toenails and, getting to sign an oath to one party or the other. Um, let's see here. Just to sort of drill down on that a little bit more, go look in the public voting records. There's probably some people that are, in Idaho, it doesn't really go the other way. There aren't people that are Republicans registering as Democrats because there's no games to be played. The Democrat primary here carries little weight, at least in East Idaho. There's parts of Idaho where that probably isn't completely true, but go look in the public records and, you probably know someone in your life that's a lefty, progressive, purple hair, King's protester type. Go look how they're registered to vote. It'll either say unaffiliated or they're registered as a Republican. You're like, oh my God, I had no idea they're a Republican. Well, spoiler alert, they're not. They just want to be able to vote in the Republican primary. So they could, again, if there's two Republicans in the Republican primary, they could say, well, I'm going to pick the Republican that I think will either win in the general election, or maybe if there's a Democrat, they'll vote for what they perceive to be the weaker Republican in the primary, so that if the weaker Republican wins the Republican primary in May, then they'll be on the general ballot or the general election ballot in November, and maybe there's a stronger Democrat, and maybe there's a chance that the Democrat can win. Either way, you see what the point I'm trying to make here, I think, is, it's very disingenuous, and I think it's kind of grimy. Like it's the kind of thing, like, do these people go home and take a shower when they're done? Like, if this was a confessional booth, there's like, not only is it a screen, it's a wall there. So let's see. Again, this is why it's the utmost importance to look at who the candidates are, look what their values are, look at their voting record. The voting record is a big tell on how people are going to behave. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't care. Look at like someone like Fetterman. The guy looks like a slob, and but look at the guy's voting record. What does the guy do? He might not be the best example. That guy, I think, has shocked a lot of people in recent times with how he's leaning. It's almost like you could wake up one day and that guy's going to come out as a Republican. But locally here, I don't care if the guy's shirt isn't tucked in. I care about how he votes and how he represents in Boise. So, there's a bunch of different web pages that rank how politicians vote in Idaho and what their record is, and they kind of score them. So I would go and take a look. And if you don't know about this already, you might be shocked at some of the Republicans around the state, and then you go sort of drill down on their voting record, and they're not quite as Republican as you think. And I don't know what state I would put them up against. You used to be able to say, Montana or Texas or Wyoming. I mean, Colorado, forget about it. Their politics have completely changed. And honestly, I think they're trying to run that same playbook here in Idaho. They're trying to run the Colorado model and just keep watering it down, get more quote unquote, moderate Republicans to run. Yeah. What can you say? Well, I think, guess we're kind of ending on a, not perhaps somber note, but just a note, right? Dismal turnout, super disappointing. If you meet someone that didn't vote, give them hell, ask them why they didn't vote. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a vote that's allowed to vote in this country. So it's a terrible thing to waste. There's a lot of votes that are not accounted for out there, and I think that's shameful. As always, I would encourage you to check out some kind of local governmental type meeting and sort of tune into what's going on in the community. You might be shocked. You might want to laugh. You might want to cry. You never know. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate you listening if you made it this far. Remember, if you want to reach out to me or contact me, you may do so by emailing me at the Isak Clemens Show at gmail.com. Don't forget to give me a follow in the Rumble app. And again, keep an eye out. We're going to get this up on YouTube and Spotify, I believe. So make sure you turn on notifications. Stay safe and have a great day.